So now I want to show you a way of bridging between Houdini and any painting application. It's actually not as difficult as you might think, and I prefer this way of doing things as opposed to the plugins that oftentimes try to link painting apps with Houdini. And I'll show you why here in a second. So, with the redshift material out, we have nothing so far. Make a redshift material. Plug that into the surface. Okay, so we want that. We want the redshift texture for our texture map. That'll go to diffuse color. And the key here is that I want a procedural way of filling in this file name. So at the end of the day, I want to be able to specify a folder where all the images live, and I want to have all of the naming taken care of for me so that we can have, let's say, one null up here where we just input two things and that'll fill all the different texture maps for the shader automatically. That's what I want. So let's call this our control panel right there. Edit parameter interface. The first thing we ought to do is browse to a folder where all those images live. So we can choose a file directory right there. Let's call this our browse images, and we'll call this our image folder. Let's actually call this name here image folder as well. There we go. Apply and accept. So now, in this case, we can browse for our textures, and in here we can do skull compressed JPEG. Okay, so this takes care of the first part of this texture path. Because remember, we're trying to just build out a string that is the file name. So let's copy this parameter and paste a relative reference so that if I middle mouse on this text, we can see that we have just the path so far. Once we get to the path, the next thing we need is the actual image name. So this would be the prefix of what this OBJ is called, or what the texture file is called. So if we go here to shading techniques, textures, and we go to skull, I'm talking about the first portion of this text. So the skull version 7. So let's make another setting for that. This time we'll do a string though. So let's say a string, and we'll call this our prefix. Apply, accept. So now, if we go to our image, let's just highlight this prefix right here with the underscore, Control C, and set that to the prefix. Copy parameter, go middle mouse this so it's not the dotted lines around that file name, and then paste relative references. Now if we middle mouse, so far we have the path, and then / skull version 7. Now we need the udim. And so the syntax for that, if we go to the very end here, is going to be open bracket, udim, close bracket. So now, middle mouse, we have all of that udim, and we need, I believe, let's go right here. Then we need the kind of map that it is. So is it a color map? Is it a normal map? We need to specify that. So let's say the udim, and then we'll then say underscore $OS. And the great thing about that is now we're going to take the node name. So that's this guy. So this guy is going to be called color. And if we go here to the image, it says color at the very end, right there. And so now for each one of these files, we can do one for, let's say, the roughness, and we could just specify it like this. We could say normal, and so on. So we have $OS, that's good, and then we just need the extension. So is it a PNG or a JPEG? What are we looking at here? So let's say dot, and then make one more parameter here, a string. We'll call this our extension. apply, accept. So now we could say extension is JPEG. So let's copy this, copy parameter, and this should allow us to finish building our string. So paste relative references. So now let's plug that into diffuse color, middle mouse this file name, and see what we have. So here's the path. We have compressed JPEG skull version 7 1001, that's the UDIM, underscore color.jpg. And that's exactly what we want. Now all we do is we hold down Alt, left mouse, and make the other one. So we say roughness, metalness, and let's go over here and just make normal for the time being. So, well, let's do normal, and let's also do something for bump. By default, Substance called this the displace height field, so we'll use that instead of bump. So here we go, just Control C, and we have that. Now, the great thing is that, again, we can middle mouse this right here, and we have roughness, and the string stays intact no matter what you do. So this will now go to reflection roughness. This will go to metallic. And the cool thing is that once you set this up once, you can just copy the entire network for anything that needs a texture map. So let's do one more thing here with the bump map. Plug this in to normal. That goes to bump. With the normal, let's also go to the gamma override and set this to linear. I just know ahead of time that that's what you need to do. And that's pretty much it for the most part. Now the great thing is that if we go, let's say we didn't have these other materials created, all you would need to do now is just make a duplicate of that network, change out these 3 pieces of info, and you've now browsed for 5 files at the same time. So it works pretty well as far as a bridge goes. It's not really a bridge, but it's my way of bridging across anything. And the great thing about it is that if you use Mari or anything else that gives you texture maps, this system still works. There's not new versions that might break. It's pretty simple, straightforward, easy to use. And yeah, that's why I like it. I think this is a good technique for working. So now, everything's good for the skull. We should be able to go to Redshift, right here, render view, and render this out. Oh, and one more thing. I forgot to change this to the tangent space normal. So if you do that and you set the texture to linear, that should do the trick with Redshift. So let's try that again. There we go. And that's what we're after. We can also change these colors a bit after the fact if we want. So what I mean by that is we can use a vector bias, which will push things generally white or dark. So it takes all the gray values and either brings it this way or darker towards black. So a bias and then a gain, so a vector gain, and that will increase the contrast. The brights become brighter, the darks become darker. So I think it'll be good to maybe do, let's say, a gain of 0.65, and then maybe bias this towards white a little bit. So maybe take this to 0.7. So now we end up, well, maybe 0.6 on that. There we go. So 0.6 with a little bit of contrast. I think this looks pretty good. This close, the detail breaks down a little bit. You can tell that just in the model. But remember, we're seeing it from all the way back here. So from this distance, this seems to do pretty darn good. So there you have it, guys. That is a painting workflow that'll work pretty well across any painting application. If you're using Mari, if you're using 3D Coat, if you're using Quixel's Mixer, or anything else, the same general technique can still apply. Just as long as you have triplanar projections within the painting app, the process pretty much remains the same. There's one more part to this series, part 3, where I'll talk about noises and I'll talk about a few other tips and tricks that I have to offer when it comes to a shading and texturing workflow. Until then, have fun texturing, and I hope you have a great day.